If you've been building WordPress sites for any amount of time, there's a really good chance you've hit this question at some point. Should this be a taxonomy or should this be a relationship field? And if you've ever answered that with, honestly, I'm just totally not sure, you're not alone. This is one of those topics that feels way more complicated than it needs to be. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to think about taxonomies and relationship fields in a practical, real-world way. No rules, no absolutes, just guidelines that help you make better decisions most of the time. Because yes, there are exceptions. There basically always are. So let's start with a really simple mental model. A taxonomy is mainly about organization. It answers the question, how should this content be grouped or filtered? A relationship field is about connection. It answers the question, which specific things are linked to this thing? That difference sounds small, but once it clicks, they change how you build sites forever. So let's talk about taxonomies first. Taxonomies are things like categories, tags, or custom ones you create yourself. And the best way to think of them is as a shared label. They're not meant to be complicated, and that's actually their strength. Imagine you're building a property website. You might want to group properties by type, for example, houses, flats, bungalows, and so on. You might also want to organize them by a location, things like Cardiff, Swansea, Newport, and again, so on. Now, those are all great use cases for taxonomies. They help users filter content, browse around, and understand what's available. When something behaves like a label, and especially when users expect to filter by it, a taxonomy usually makes the most sense. But taxonomies do have limits. Where people run into trouble is when they start treating taxonomies like full-blown content. A really common example is an instructor or an author. You might start by adding an instructor taxonomy to your courses, and at first that feels absolutely fine. But then you want to add a photo, a bio, social links, and maybe a profile page listing all of their courses. At this point, what started as a simple label has quietly turned into a real thing, and taxonomies aren't great at being, well, basically things. So let's take a quick look at how easy it is to set up and create your own taxonomies. Now, I'm going to be using ACF for this example, but you can use any of the tools out there, ACF, Metabox, Toolset, any of those. They all give you basically the same set of options. So all we need to do is click to add a new taxonomy. We'll give this a name. For this example, we'll call it location. Set the post type. For this example, we'll just simply associate it with a normal post, but you can associate this with a custom post type if you created them. Underneath, you've got some options for whether you want to make this public, hierarchical, which is more of a visual thing than anything, and I generally tend to enable that option. And we can come into advanced configuration to tweak some of the options here. So do we want to allow it to be sorted? Do you want to change the labels on here if you want to, which you can do? Again, most of these are going to be perfectly fine. Set your visibility rules, where and when you want to show them. Add it to the admin column, which in a lot of cases makes a lot of sense. You can customize the URL. Again, we're going to set this to be hierarchical, leave everything else as it is. Any permissions you want to set, and whether you want to connect this to the REST API. That is basically all there is to it. Hit Save Changes, and now we can start to organize things based upon their location. So now if we take a look under our post, you'll see location is available alongside tags and categories, the native functions inside WordPress. And if you click on location, you can now basically start adding your locations, and you can create as many taxonomies as you want or need, and you can then associate them with any kind of post type, both native post types inside WordPress or custom post types you create by using a tool like Advanced Custom Fields. Relationship fields are designed to connect actual pieces of content together. Instead of saying this course has a label John Smith, you're saying this course is connected to this specific instructor. So now you might have a course post type and an instructor post type connected by a relationship field. Each instructor has their own data, their own page, and their own presence on the site. One instructor can teach multiple courses, and one course can have multiple instructors, and that relationship is clear, intentional, and flexible. So this is also why relationships work so well in things like business directories. If a location is just a city name, users filter by, a taxonomy might be perfectly fine. But if that location has an address, a map, opening hours, and maybe several businesses tied to it, then it's no longer just a label, it's an entity, and entities work much better as posts connected by relationships. So now this is an important part. Everything I'm describing here is a guideline and not a rule book. You absolutely can use a taxonomy in more advanced ways, and you can bend relationships to do simpler jobs. WordPress is flexible like that. But flexibility doesn't always mean clarity, especially 6 months down the line when you come back to a project and wonder what the past you was thinking when they created it in this way. So instead of asking, what can WordPress do? A better question is, what makes this easier to understand and maintain long term? Here's a simple question I like to ask when I'm unsure. If I printed this out on a piece of paper, would it look like a list of words or like a card with details? If it's basically a list of labels, a taxonomy is probably fine. If it feels like something that deserves its own card with a name, description, image, and purpose, then a relationship is usually the cleaner option. Again, not a rule, just a really useful way to think about it. Now, the biggest mistake I see usually come from overthinking or underthinking this choice. Using taxonomies for people, using relationships for simple labels, or turning everything into a custom post type just in case. Now, more complexity doesn't make a site more professional. Most of the time, it just makes it harder to work with. So the takeaway is this: taxonomies are great for grouping and filtering content. Relationship fields are great for connecting real, meaningful pieces of data. If you treat this as a set of guiding principles rather than strict rules, you'll make better decisions, build clearer systems, and save yourself a lot of frustration later on down the line. Now, if you find this useful, all applicable links are in the description down below. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.